Hey guys, I just tried my first Facebook live streaming and it didn't work. I've sat here for 15 minutes showing all sorts of cool graphics related to the Amaranth Chronicles that no one's ever going to see because I recorded this video and it disappeared. So this is me re-recording it and I'm just going to upload it and we'll see where it goes. I wanted to thank everybody recently who's liked my Grace Cathedral art. It's been a lot of fun building it, and I wanted to show you guys some things today on it. I've been using 3D Studio Max now, and it's weird to say this. I've been using 3D Studio Max now for 20 years, and that's what I'm building the model in, and I'm using Octane Renderer. Octane Renderer is kind of new. It's only been around a few years. I've just started using it in the past 9 months, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And so let's see if you guys can see this. Looks like you guys can see this. Here's Grace Cathedral. Here's my model of it. And what I wanted to take you guys through today is kind of what I'm doing with it, because there's a lot of people here that have been commenting, Amaranth Chronicle fans and 3D modeling fans, and just people that come by my Facebook and look at this and it's like, wow, what is that? I've had a few people think I'm actually physically building like a little train set model somewhere in my house. If you have that much room here in San Francisco, you must be doing well. But no, I'm not building an actual model. I am building this model with the intent of using it for the Amaranth Chronicles, because, and this is by no means an official announcement, and I don't think this will shock anyone, but we are putting together materials to pitch the Amaranth Chronicles as a computer-generated series for something like Hulu or Netflix or web. And in order to do that, we have to kind of create a vision to show what that'll look like. So one of the things you guys have probably been seeing in the past few months is I've been uploading art, renders, 3D renders, computer-generated material for the Amaranth Chronicles to Facebook, as well as the amaranthchronicles.com website. So this is kind of an extension of that. We're starting to go a little bit bigger. For those of you on my Facebook, and this is to the friends and my friends and family, you guys probably remember a while back, about 2 years ago, I started socializing this model. Clearly, as you guys can see, I've done a lot of work on it recently. And I'm really happy with the way it's coming along. And I wanted to kind of showcase some of the best parts of this. So one of the challenges recently was, okay, it looks like Grace Cathedral. I have taken a lot of creative liberties with it, like a lot. And I'll explain those as we go. But one of the challenges that I ran into recently is I need to add some foliage around this to really help make it look real, or at least more professionally computer animated. And so I'm kind of getting there. So one of the first things that stands out with Grace Cathedral that everyone notices are the cherry blossoms in the front. Now, 3D Studio Max has some foliage tools built into it that initially I was on the fence about using because they generate a lot of polygons. And in 3D, polygons, triangles, the more, less is more, I'll say that. Just like in a video game, you want to give the illusion of resolution or the illusion of detail without actually having to build the objects. Because it becomes taxing on the computer. But I have used 3D Studio Max's foliage tools, and I'm starting to get some really good results. So I'm going to turn on my cherry blossom trees, and you'll see the screen update. And I'm happy with the way these are turning out so far. Cherry blossoms are really interesting trees, and they're really beautiful. And if you guys see me looking back like from you and then over here, it's because I have two monitors. The monitor where I'm like doing things on is here. And my monitor that I'm seeing what you guys are seeing is over here. So you'll see me looking back and forth. But here's the cherry blossoms around the entryway to Grace Cathedral, and if we let the screen rasterize, we can even just start to make out the labyrinth that's here. I have to work on the sunlight a little bit more and the glossiness and the specularity of my materials, but here are cherry blossoms, and I'm liking the way these are turning out so far. It's really interesting. Let me zoom in here. So this model, like I said, I plan to be using it in... See, I don't know if I'm supposed to be looking forward at the model or up at you guys. I am going to be using this to create some art for the Amaranth Chronicles. And getting it looking fairly real is important to me. And this model, we're already at 1,348,768 polygons or triangles. And so it's still working, but eventually I'm going to hit that upper limit of polygons, and I'm going to start having to scale back. Right now I can do trees this detailed. That might change though. I might have to go with an alternative solution. But I'm getting there. I'm working on this. It's happening slowly. But like I said, Grace Cathedral, these cherry blossoms out front are really important to it being recognizable as Grace Cathedral. Here, we're going to zoom in, kind of isolate these a little bit. I'm happy with the result thus far. It's been a challenge, not just to figure out how to build trees convincingly, but also I'm partially colorblind. And this side of the spectrum, I don't see all that. I don't see it the same way you guys see it. So I've had to use Photoshop to really target the authenticity of the colors here. So if it doesn't look good, it's not my fault. I'm disabled, and you guys should feel sorry for me. That's what it is, right? But I've been working on the foliage here. And in this area of Grace Cathedral, not only is there a lot of foliage in real life, it's an opportunity to really kind of do some fun stuff here. So I stuck in these two palm trees, just kind of testing the palm tree generator. 3D Studio Max has a palm tree generator. It's been here for a while, and I've never used it before. But these trees are unique. They're randomly generated based on parameters. And then they also had this tool where you can add in weeping willows. I love weeping willows. I think they're really cool looking trees, and they fill the space really well. Now, weeping willows, depending on where they are in the season, can come in a variety of colors or a range of colors. And I decided to go with emerald green just because I needed something to strike a contrast against the cold gray background of the stucco or the building material. I needed something that could pop out from that. And I'm pretty happy with the result. I could mess with the materials a little bit more at this vantage point, at this scale or this distance from the trees. We're kind of up against the uncanny valley where, yeah, they're recognizable as trees, but I don't know how real they look. If I turn these off, I want to show you something else. Another thing that I went for. Oh, you guys might see a crash. You might see a crash live here on Facebook. No, it's just saving. There's no crash. So if we turn off our weeping willows, another thing that I needed to do was find a way to kind of break up this ground space. I have a ivy texture on it, but like I said, when you're working with 1,000,000 polygons, you have to save triangles everywhere you can. So giving the ground a lot of detail, or even terraforming it, making it look like dirt or ivy, wasn't really in the budget, so to speak. But I came up with kind of a clever fix for it that you see in video games a lot. So I'm going to turn on the vines and you'll see what I mean. So you see we have vines draped over the edge now. And we even see kind of like I don't know what you call this ivy kind of sprouting out from the foliage on the ground. But if I bring the 3D Studio Max window over here, I'm going to have to lower that. But if I bring it over here, you can see that it's actually, like this ivy are just two-dimensional planes with my ivy texture mapped to them. So that's what's really going on here. And the surprising thing is it looks really good once all the other elements are there. So let me find a really good angle to kind of show what I mean. And I did the same thing down here, if you can see my mouse cursor. I did vines down there as well, or the ivy texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and show you guys the beauty pass of the Octane renderer. So now we see that. But as we start turning on like things like these weeping willows, it's going to load. The shadowing from the trees above it and these two-dimensional planes starts looking pretty convincingly. I mean, pretty convincing. So if we turn on some of the other plants, I've got some bushes here. If I can find them. I have this long list with everything in my scene. Here are my bushes. Let's turn these on. So as these bushes pop in, as we start adding these elements on top of each other, it starts looking pretty good and pretty convincing, at least to the point where I'm satisfied with it. I don't know how close, when I produce the next batch of art for the Amaranth Chronicles, that's going to be centering around Lithia and fan favorite Tarja. I don't know how close we're going to be getting to the model itself. So this distance might work. We might have to get in a little bit closer when you start seeing these little edges and issues with it. But I'm not sure yet. Right now, the scale of this model and the detail of the model is pretty good. I can get in pretty close when I need to. For instance, we have some pots back here. Let's zoom into a pot. And you'll see some ivy growing up the wall. And that ivy, give or take, maybe twice the height of a person, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I'm satisfied with the effect. I'm satisfied with the textures, at least from this vantage point. And as I start popping in the rest of the foliage, you guys will see how convincing this is. So one of the things, 3D Studio Max has tools for different types of plants. It's not a really expansive set of tools for different plants, but you can get some variations. You get cherry blossom trees, whispering willows, or weeping willows, and you can also get things like spruces. And those may or may not pop in. Yeah, they popped in. The way I've had to structure this file, not everything has immediate feedback. But, so I mean, a spruce kind of looks like a Christmas tree. It's different than a pine, but it's similar. And so I was starting to experiment with popping these in to just kind of break up the space. I thought that here, this tree here breaks up the space on this wall behind it. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. But spruces are kind of boring. They're complex to render. And they weren't really tailored for what I was trying to do. For instance, if we go here into the courtyard, in real life, there are two planter boxes here, like I've tried to replicate these two planter boxes. And there's a lot of negative space above these until we start getting to the window. I needed something to kind of fill that space. If we orbit around to the back side of Grace Cathedral, now I've taken, like I said, I've taken a lot of creative liberties with this model. Certain things are here that are not in real life, and there are certain things in real life that are not here, at least not yet. For instance, there's a steeple on top of Grace Cathedral about here where these two roofs meet. I am going to put it in, or something comparable, I just haven't yet. But as we can see here on the side of Grace Cathedral, there's a lot of kind of unused vertical space underneath these windows. And in real life, there's quite a bit of foliage around the base of the building and in the courtyard. None of it is super tall, but I needed to create something that could use up some of this vertical space underneath the windows that is frankly just kind of boring and repetitive. So I started playing with the idea of adding pine trees, and these will pop in. And pine trees afford us a really interesting opportunity because they're tall and pointy, kind of like spruces, but these are a lot more full. And as you can see here, I've been able to use this vertical space underneath the windows a little bit better. Let me orbit here to the side. And as you can see here, I've used this boring space between the pylons and this flat space down here to a little more, I've been able to use it more. And the cool thing about pine trees, as you can see in this area, pine trees are very tall and pointed, so you can stick them in between the windows. If I was going to add a lot of foliage and trees, I needed something that wouldn't negate the use of the stained glass windows, because this church is covered in them. And it wouldn't make sense to have trees blocking them, but the cool thing about the pine trees, since they're tall and narrow, they fit between these windows really well. Let's zoom in and I'll show you what I mean. Like, that is just so cool that I can do that, and they fill that space so well. And so I thought, okay, let's keep going with that. And so far, I have put pine trees all the way around the back of the model. I don't know if I'm going to keep them. I might make it a little more accurate to the actual foliage that's there. Or I might even make them taller to use more of this space back there. But like I said, the art I plan to do with this, I don't know how much of the back of the cathedral we're going to see. So yeah. So as I've started adding more and more plants, now some of these plants were designed so that they would pop in, and other plants I'd actually have to I have to repopulate this window. So yeah, this is one that I'm going to have to repopulate. So let me close this and re-render. So 3D Studio Max, you can put in oak trees. Oak trees are the most boring thing when it comes to 3D, like the most boring kind of foliage. And I've added a few of these in here, and when this is done rendering, you'll see these. I've added a handful of these in here just to kind of flesh out the foliage of the main plaza. I don't know if I'm going to keep them. I think they look all right. I'm not really sold on them. But from a certain distance, they have a certain realism to them that I think works. So yeah, I've sprinkled a few of these in. I put one in the back. It's interesting because the real Grace Cathedral is on the top of a hill. For those of you not familiar with it, it's on top of a hill, but not like right on the top. So part of the complex, it is like 4 stories below the other corner of the hill. Like over here, this corner, and then street level where the staircases are. It's insane, the divergence. But so yeah, those are my oak trees. I threw in a sprinkling of those. I also started to add in some other decorative plants. I'm going to turn on everything here at once. And I've also added in a lot of props, things to help sell the size of this model, and also ways of just making it look more realistic. I'm going to turn on everything. And I don't know how much you guys can see. I'm going to have to re-render the scene. But I'm also really happy how these pine trees turned out right here. How they don't quite block the stained glass windows, but they break up the space down here. And I think actually between these two planters there's a little stage I don't know what it's used for. Let me re-render this scene, and you guys can see more of the cool elements I've added here to help show size and scale. I have been... this model, over the last 2 years, has taken me... I mean, I've probably dumped about 400 to 450 hours into this model. And I'm really happy with how it's turning out, and these little things. For instance, if we zoom in here to this trash can and these benches next to it, I'm happy at how everything's really turning out. Like I said, scales are a little off. All the prop scales are to the right scale, and doorways are to the right scale. But as we can see here, a bit of this viney ivy is probably too big. But we may never have to see it this close. I'm planning to build, around this model, some of the future cyberpunk San Francisco dystopia that we talk about in the book. So that's going to be it's going to be interesting to do that and juxtapose it against this Gothic cathedral with all of these plants. But if we zoom in here, here's some of the stuff I've been working on just today and yesterday, is adding flowers, but adding foliage that's colorful and pretty, but doesn't add too much to the complexity of the scene. For instance, right now, we see these flowers, but if I bring 3D Studio Max, the window over here, we can see that once again I went with the more two-dimensional method where you have the image mapped to a plane that's just been deformed. And oh my, the sun is now coming in through the window, and it's probably been all over my face for the last 20 minutes. But yeah. Let's go back to the beauty render. So yeah, it's a matter of how do you get a good effect easily and cheaply. And so I've been experimenting with this. Now, like I said, I've taken a lot of creative liberties. If we zoom in here, we can actually see a little bicycle that's chained up over here. We can see these little easel signs that I'm going to add advertisements for Tuesday night yoga. Grace Cathedral's had Tuesday night yoga, not right now during COVID-19, but has had it for I don't even know how long, and I figure that's probably a tradition that'll carry on into the future. But, like I said, I'm having to take certain creative liberties. For those of you familiar with the Amaranth Chronicles, Grace Cathedral played an interesting role. It served as kind of a backdrop to one of our characters, to Lithia. I'm sure you guys have seen those of you not familiar with the series have seen some of the art I've been posting. The woman who has red hair. She volunteers, we're kind of vague about it in the book, but she volunteers or runs a garden, a flower nursery, kind of like Home Depot's home and garden section that's at Grace Cathedral. Now, in real life, they don't do that. And in real life, what we're looking at here, this courtyard, doesn't exist. In real life, this is a school, it's a building, and on the rooftop they have some basketball courts. But I was thinking, you know, we talk about the garden, I could have put it on that roof, but then I thought, what if, you know, in the future this building has had architectural changes, maybe there's been an earthquake, who knows. So I hollowed it out with the idea of creating the courtyard that we talk about in the story, and the courtyard I envision in my head as being down in this area. And that's, as you can see here, not something I've started on yet, but that's probably going to be the next part of this I'm going to work on. And then it was an important detail in the book because it gives a backstory to who Lithia is, right? And then I started thinking, well, if they have the garden, and we've made it clear that this in the future, this is one of the ways the church brings in money to sell, like a flower nursery, to sell all sorts of garden equipment and flowers and stuff. The church would need a physical retail space. So I've kind of thought that far ahead. Here, let me orbit around. and figured, what if the retail space is actually this rooftop, this terraced rooftop right up here. So I hope you guys can see my mouse cursor. I guess we'll find out, right? This door here would actually open, and that's how they would bring their materials up from the courtyard or the nursery where they're growing it up to the retail space. And then this fence here would be open during certain business hours. I'm just starting to play with this now. I don't know how far I'm going to take this, and I don't know how far I can take this given the complexity of the scene already. But I'm going to have a hell of a fun time figuring it out. The important thing right now is getting it to look like a photograph of Grace Cathedral, getting it to look believable as the real place. And if I can do that, the goal then is to take it really off the rails and to start doing my cyberpunk city around it. So that's kind of where I am right now with the model. I figured today I'd do a video because it's there's something about it that is fun. You guys can see my face and see my enthusiasm, not just for 3D modeling, but for the Amaranth Chronicles, and get a sense of why I'm doing this. Because I feel like in the last 6 to 9 months, it's been harder for me personally to connect with my audience with the Amaranth Chronicles. We had a good run when the book first came out and when we first started doing the art, but I've got to kind of level it up if I'm going to get new readers and new fans, and especially if it's going to work in this new direction where I'm going to try to put together this pitch and pitch this as an animated series. I mean, that's my dream. My dream has always been to have an animated series and to have action figures and lunchboxes and movie posters and cell phone covers of the Amaranth Chronicles, all the crap that Star Trek and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter has. That's always been my dream with the Amaranth Chronicles. And, you know, I know a lot of authors, and I know a lot of really talented authors, and I think on some level that's all of our dreams, right? The Hollywood American dream where you wrote the book and it became this big thing. Fortunately, I've spent the last 20 years developing a skill set that can actually help push things in that direction. So I am inclined to use my abilities to do so. So yeah, thanks for being with me here today, guys. Thanks for participating in this first video upload. I plan to do these semi-regularly as I work on different pieces of art for the series. And I just hope you guys had fun, and I will see you guys later.